Welcome to World of Marketing Podcast, a Foster Web Marketing production. Here's your host, Tom Foster.
Hello, everybody. It's Tom Foster on the World of Marketing. Still working on the theme song there. And here I am with my buddy, Dr. Dave Weiman. Dr. Dave.
Tom, it is great to be with you.
You know what, Dr. Dave? What was it? It was last week, I think, when I woke up and I woke up and I was like, what the? And by the way, this is like R-rated. So I can say, what the I have screwed up, and I can't believe how long it took me to invite you onto this program, right? And I said that to you, and I, because you're up early too, and we were like Facebook messaging.
Yep. You can't rush quality, Tom. That's what I always say.
Yes,
particularly if clients need something and it's late. I say you can't rush quality. You don't tell the chef to speed up.
Just take one good look at yourselves in the mirror, because it's a fucking disgrace.
That's right. And I was like, man, and I was happy that you weren't upset with me.
Not at all.
So thank you very much for joining this program.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So those of you that don't know Dr. Dave Weiman, he is a good buddy of mine. And I was introduced by the spectacular human being through another spectacular human being, Dave Freeze, who you've been good friends with for eons.
Yes.
And we are in this secret group, the Business Black Ops BBO group together. And that's how we met. Right?
It's kind of like the Masons, but it's not.
I was going to say that, actually. You took it, but that's fine. You can take it.
There's a lot of initiation rituals and
weird stuff going on.
Oh, it's very weird. Yeah.
Right. And we've had a few Business Black Ops members. We had Sam. I've had Sam.
Yes.
And he's been a reoccurring member.
That's awesome.
And he'll be proud to know that I've used that word a couple of times. It's a math word.
Okay.
And,
he would be proud of that.
I know.
I can see Sam just kind of nodding.
Yes. And I had Ed Littlejohn, a new member.
Ed Littlejohn's good people.
He's great people. And I had him on here a couple weeks ago, and he turned the tides on me, and he interviewed me. And so, and I fell for it. My ego just fell for it right away, and I just blabbed about myself. But this is not about me. This is about you. So I would like you to please tell the people a little bit about what you do. How about we start there?
We can start
Besides
there.
the fact you're just an amazingly handsome man.
Why, thank you. It's a lot of surgeries and hairstylists and makeup people, because otherwise, if I walk down the street, I assure you, like, people would be grabbing their kids out of the way, and it's somewhat repulsive. But thanks. And I remember just meeting you the first time, and there were kind of two aspects of this. One was there was a formal setting of a mastermind group, but also just getting time to spend with you after that. And you're the same person, and you're the genuine person, and you're always who you are. And I think that inspires other people to do the same thing, because when you laugh, it's full blown. Tom gets it. And some of the comments that you made that I got to hear, because I'm one of the guys that sits in the back of the room, and you're one of the guys that sits in the back of the room, one of the people that sits in the back of the room.
We sit back and laugh. And
so that's often where I learned all the other stuff other than what the teacher was saying, much to their dismay. I remember, and I'll get to what I do, but I remember reading a report card, and this is back in the days when the teachers would handwrite notes on a report card. And the teacher wrote, "David is often absorbed in his own thoughts," which basically means he's not paying attention. And I thought, but some of those absorbed thoughts were the best thoughts that I had.
Yeah, I
So
had that.
I
had
don't
that
know
a
if
lot of
phonics
stuff.
was more important than that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm a psychologist and leadership consultant, and I love helping people. I mean, every day when I come into the office, it's fun opening the door and getting there's sirens coming to get me, by the way. So if I'm let out of this room,
You
please,
see
this
you
was
being
awesome,
dragged.
right? But the leadership development from a psychologist point of view is helping people get better in some way. And so part of what I do is talent assessment, help companies assess the people that they feel are appropriate. They've gotten to a certain point in the hiring process where they know the person has the technical skills. If they're hiring for a finance role, they know the person can do math. You know, they feel like they have the technical skills there. I look at the personality of that person they're going to hire and try to help the employer and the person they're trying to hire, because it should benefit both parties, understand, is this a fit in terms of the person's style and the culture of the organization? The second area that I work in is executive coaching. And that doesn't mean that the person is not doing well. It typically is somebody who's doing well, and to get to the next level in their career could use some additional help. And the third area is just straight ahead leadership development consulting, which is there's a problem that's larger than one person. Maybe a team isn't delivering what it's supposed to. An example would be a new product development team that isn't creating new products because of problems within the team. And within that, also, I do seminars for companies. So basically standing up in front of a room or engaging with people to convey something or learn together something. And I've been very fortunate in my career because I've met just some amazing people and I feel like I learn more from what I'm doing than I ever convey. I'm not somebody who gives advice necessarily. I don't see that as my role. But a side piece of what I do is within the talent assessment is law enforcement evaluations. And that has taught me a lot that can be applied from the law enforcement side to general pre-hire screening of individuals. So
That's interesting,
but it's just
especially in
it's a fun
today's
job. Yeah.
particular what's going on. I didn't know that you did that.
Yep. So I've done that at the federal level for federal law enforcement agencies, all the way down to the municipal level, municipal police departments.
So, and but isn't one of your bigger clients Siemens?
Yes, Siemens is,
Your biggest?
anybody who has Siemens as a client, that's like the largest client. If somebody
like,
has them, that's, yeah, there's,
and you were all over the world working with them.
yes,
right?
with Siemens and with the company Freudenberg Household Products, which here in the United States makes the O-Cedar brand of mops and brooms. And in Europe, their brand Vileda is kind of like Rubbermaid is here. And they flew me all over the world. I mean, I'm not somebody who likes to travel. And I mean, I guess like pantomiming for what you want, you know, you don't speak to, I'd like some bread, you know, and you kind of pantomime bread. I can't do that. And I am interested in people just in general, but never had that travel bug. And all of a sudden, they're sending me to Germany, Italy. They sent me to Lake Como for a break because we had a program in Milan and we had a program near Frankfurt, Germany. And there was a couple days in between. This company sends me to Lake Como, Bellagio. And I do appreciate travel now that I've had those experiences. But before that, I guess I wasn't somebody who would have chosen to go someplace like that. And I remember the first time I took an international flight was in 2011. And I was worried about like, what happens if I get there and then everything that I have disappears? I would have these like weird thoughts about just being stranded in a foreign country. And I didn't realize that people in Germany speak English better than we do, and that the chances of that happening were nil. But yes, so.
So what is this about the law enforcement stuff?
Early in my career, I had a mentor who did these pre-hire psychologicals, and for police departments, because the public safety is so important, protecting the public from people who shouldn't be in law enforcement, a lot of departments have
which is a
requirements.
lot right now.
Yeah, departments have requirements in each state for the psychological fitness that the person has for the role that they're taking on. So if in a municipal department all the way up to a federal department, I've done work, for example, for the Drug Enforcement Administration, in the DEA Special Agent Program, federal air marshals, the police officers who work for the Veterans Affairs hospitals. They have requirements for psychological testing before the person can join the force. So typically, it's a psychologist who would perform that pre-hire psychological evaluation.
So what do you think about, and I guess I'm kind of putting you on the spot because we don't really talk about any of this before this, but what do you think about this business going on, and what are your thoughts with this George Floyd business in Minneapolis and those cops there? And
Yeah. Well, I'm not familiar with what the pre-hire process
yeah,
would have been in that department, but people pursue law enforcement roles for all kinds of reasons. Some of them have a strong desire to provide protection to the public, and they're really driven by that. And you can tell that when they're describing it, how important that is in the interviews. So we do an interview, we do other assessments that are required as part of this process. Um, there are also people who get into law enforcement because of something that happened to them. They may have been a victim of a crime earlier in their life or known somebody who was, and want to now be proactive about ensuring the safety of the public. So that's another kind of type of person who gets involved. But the position may also draw people who wish to have some kind of, get people to comply with them.
yeah,
And that's not as good for a role like that, because you never know what you're encountering, you never know what's going to happen. And human behavior is very difficult to predict. I mean, it just is. Even judges who see criminals all day long, all the time, will make decisions about who should get parole, for example. And that person goes out and commits a crime again. And you say, well, this is judge is sitting in a courtroom all day and they see criminals all the time. And you'd think they'd have like a database up there. But in one study that I'm familiar with, I think the prisoner or the people who were arrested who were then released by judges on parole, parole. They may not have done necessarily better than chance in some cases, as I recall. I could be wrong about that, but it wasn't a significant number of people who the judges felt should be released pending their trial date, where those people complied with all the requirements of their parole. It's just difficult to do it. I mean, trying to predict behavior is a challenge. And you and I were at the program with Chase Hughes,
yeah,
who, I mean, this guy's just made a science of it. He's been doing it for years. He's an expert at it. He's done it at a super high level. Most common people don't have that kind of training. So predicting what anybody who joins a law enforcement agency will do is very difficult. You can look at what they've done in the past, and you can look at the patterns and the psychological assessments that are used. But I think in the case that is happening right now, when you hear that somebody had 18
right,
complaints against them, well, you think about it's kind of like, DUI. I don't know anybody who has one DUI, but if somebody told me they had 3, I'd start to think, man, like, what didn't you learn after the first one that you got a second one? What didn't you learn after you got the second one that you're like, I don't know, I'll roll the dice again. So by the time somebody has that many complaints, a few things just occur to your mind, which is, well, how many people were also affected and didn't complain? Because the complaint is just something that went forward, right? That's something that actually somebody pushed. But I imagine, we don't know, but I imagine there are people out there who have been affected by a violent, something that they should complain about, and they don't because they think they're powerless, or they don't think anything will happen from it. But the most important damage that it does, aside from what actually happened in that event, which was so horrible, is that when the public doesn't trust that entire field, forget just that department, but they generalize it to all police, and they see it as permanent. It's always going to be this way. That is horrible, because we're all in this together. And I can't think of any other job where you go out and you know you could die that day. And that's police work. And so that's the other side of it, which is to want to do that job for the ones who are really in it for the right reasons. They're putting their life on the line every day. I don't come to work thinking I might not go home. And I can't imagine, excuse me, what that would be like. But for the folks that I've met in my career, doing these evaluations over and over again, for the ones who do it for the right reasons, we're lucky as a society to have them, and we're as unlucky as a society when somebody uses it to brutalize other people, because it's, the ability, not the ability, everybody has that, I guess, that ability, but when you're in that role, you have a much higher level of responsibility for acting in a way that protects people and doesn't make them feel victimized, and make them feel like it's unsafe to be around the very people that when you're a little kid, you're taught, oh, the policeman is there to protect you and there to help you. And imagine that never feeling that way in your entire life.
And you're still seeing it. You're still seeing brutality. You're still
Yeah.
seeing, and you're seeing kindness. I mean, you're seeing both of it out there, still today.
Yep.
And you open up the news and you're seeing the media report on both. And you're right. I agree with you. I can't think of a more difficult job. I was talking to a nurse at my doctor's office. Who was worked in the ER for 13 years, the night shift, and I was thinking, like, how do you get excited to go to work for that?
Right.
Like the night shift at the ER. I mean, like, that's just but she did it, and people do that, and doctors do that, and
Yep.
you're right. I mean, they have a calling. They want to help people, and I'm not of the opinion that there's dirty cops, for sure. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. I knew a lot of shitty jarheads that went into the police force, and they couldn't wait to just go pound heads. I mean, like,
Right.
that was their thing, like, to your point. And they're guys, like, they're male and female out there that do that,
Yep.
that get off on that stuff. You see them out there all the time, but I believe that there's the vast majority are there to help, to serve
And most
and
of
protect.
and most of police work is not what people see on TV, even in dramas about it.
Right.
And so I think that a normal, healthy officer wants to go home without having to have chased somebody, risk getting hurt, hurting other people, and all these other things. But the studies around this, around what compels certain people to act a certain way, even whether or not they have a partner in the car with them, and whether or not somebody is more likely to act in a certain way, whether they're partnered up or not. And I don't remember enough about that study to comment on it beyond that, but there are differences there, and we're all subject to that, that context that we're in. So in studies of authority, people can be compelled to do all kinds of things that they wouldn't normally do. But yeah, I don't think most of police work. You think the guy who's working a speed trap, who's a police officer, wants to be sitting there, I mean, no, they want to be out and moving around and interacting with the public, and solving problems. But police get stuck doing speed traps, and I don't think they like it very much.
Right.
Neither do the people who are caught in speed traps.
Right.
But the officer didn't wake up that day and decide to do it. Usually, there's another entity that asks. Maybe the municipality says there's too much speeding going on, so could you guys, set something up?
And that serves a purpose too.
Right, but that job is just. I think they're happy when they, like I said, a normal, healthy police officer is happy that they got home at the end of the day, in one piece.
And I think that, here we are, two white guys talking about this stuff. I don't want to, but I just want to say this because I've been wanting to say it for a while. I read a really good article yesterday, and I have been just riveted to the news. And it was an article, and it was in the Los Angeles Times by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I'll be happy to send it to you. But I just
Oh,
want
sure.
to read a quote from it because I think it's very poetic. And it's, racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in. Then you see it's everywhere. As long as we keep shining that light, we have a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. But we have to stay vigilant because it's always still in the air.
Yep.
I mean, that gives me chills. And it's true. And when you see it every day, and just go back a few weeks ago to Michigan, when the pandemic, and the governor is like, nope, you can't go out, and we got a bunch of white people storming the Capitol with their guns. It's all white people, and screaming and yelling at the police, and nobody is doing a thing. And our own president is like, liberate, and like saying, yeah, go out there and protest.
The government.
Yeah.
Protest the government.
Yeah. And then now here we have totally different. Black people are out there protesting, and look what's happening.
Yep.
This is, and I just sit and read, and I don't know what to do. It seems very hopeless, and we have no leadership. We have nobody who's going to fix it. Who? And it just seems to get made worse and made worse. And, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I mean, it's just a very sad state for our country. And
it is, and we have amnesia for our own
Yeah.
racism in this country, and that's not good either. But I am hopeful, and the reason why I say that is that everybody who can take a step forward to help with this situation matters, because all of that matters. And thinking about it and talking about it and doing something that any one person can do matters. There was an article in the New York Times about the situation in Newark, New Jersey, where they had relatively little negative incidents related to these demonstrations and these protests. And I'm separating that from looting and rioting, which are in a totally different context. But what you're saying reminded me that the way that they manage that is they have very strong neighborhood groups and very strong community groups. Well, what is a group? A group is a few people who get together and they decide that they're going to be productive, they're going to help with something. And they mentioned one of the groups, I was thinking, oh, they must mean these community groups, it's hundreds of people. But they quoted one group that had a very positive impact on the situation there that was 30 people. Well, that's 30 individuals, that's 30 people who decided to do something together that does have an impact. And people, regardless of their race, when they recognize that there's a problem and we all put our shoulder into it, that really does make a difference, and that is important. And there is something about that unity that can overcome so much. But the country right now seems, it can seem hopelessly divided. And that's the unconscious biases that people are falling into without even realizing it. And that's okay, because that's the situation. I don't mean it's okay like it's acceptable. It's
Right.
unacceptable. But we know what we're dealing with, and we know how bias works, and we know that most of it is unconscious, and bias, all by its definition, is it's an error in some ways. So it does seem a lot. You see in videos right now, individual people talking to an individual police officer or a few National Guardsmen and having an impact on them. Isn't that amazing? One
Yeah.
person can do that. That's person to person. And I think that really is powerful, because when a lot of people see it, and that's the benefit of social media, the flip side of it is that it's terribly destructive as well. But those individual moments where somebody sees a police officer hugging somebody, why?
Right.
Because they're two human
We're
beings.
siding with the
Yep.
protesters and, you know, putting down their batons and
Exactly.
marching with them. I mean, I think that's a very powerful thing. Yeah. I'm a generally optimistic guy, and I know that there'll be another side. Everything, you and I have talked about this, everything is a wave, and we will be okay.
Yep.
We will heal, but man, we have got to figure out as humanity, not just, you know, as a not just as Americans or whatever, but
Right.
as humanity, how to work together and live together on this planet and stop this I'm better than you, I win, you lose, all this nonsense. It's just
I tried to think of a single situation in life that was made better by people deciding to hate each other. And I can't think of
no.
anything in my whole life where that made something better. I know the power of uplifting other people. I know the power of seeing the nobility in something that somebody's doing that they might not even recognize, and acknowledging that, because we can't do that ourselves. There's a lot that we can't do ourselves, and the blind spots are critical, because a lot of times the only way you're going to get the blind spot, you get the light cast on it, as you mentioned in that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar piece, which was so powerful, is somebody else has to share that reality with you. One of my cousins calls it giving someone a reality cookie. And that is letting them know something that they have a blind spot for, that they're blind to. But the power of any one person and to have some impact is really important. A buddy of mine who's a finance expert, I said, what turns a housing market around? When people say the housing market turned around, what does that mean? And he said, one person will decide to buy a house in one neighborhood where nothing was selling before. And other people see that person take that risk, and then they're now encouraged to buy a house. I'm like, that's it? The whole thing is one person decided to do something different? Yep. Because he said there always has to be one person who steps up to buy that house when no one else was buying, and that encourages other people to do
well,
it.
that's kind of a peer pressure kind of thing, isn't it? I mean, that's just
Well,
kind
it's the power of social influence,
right.
and that can go positive or that can go negative, and that's what
Sure.
we're seeing writ large right now.
Okay. Well, that was an interesting turn. Well, I hope that you get hired to do some law enforcement.
That's not the main thing that I do. It's just an
Might
interesting,
be.
yeah, it's just an interesting aspect of it. And having done it for years, I've met a lot of people who come from military backgrounds. So maybe they served on special forces before, and now they're going into a federal law enforcement position. I've never met a single person who was happy about force that they had to use on another person. And they often don't want to talk about it or won't talk about it, because that affects a person. And when you see it on TV, it's fleeting, and these things are happening really fast. And it's hard to realize that somebody who has to, not a bad cop, I'm talking about a good person who's
Right.
had to do it for whatever reason in their fulfilling a mission in their military career. The guys that I've met, they ain't happy about that. That's
They don't
not
like to
something they
talk
brag
about it.
about. They don't like to
Right.
talk about it, and they're often people who do not try to stick out in a crowd. They would rather not. So.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, because this is a marketing podcast. So let's talk about something a little bit different and do a little pivot here, because I'd like to talk about something that I think is a little bit funny, which is something in your background. You used to be a marketing guy at a very popular fast food chain.
Yes. That was a great job.
Wendy's.
Right. My whole prior career was in advertising and marketing.
Yeah. So
And yeah, psychology was a career change for me. So that
where's
is
the beef?
yeah, where's the beef?
Can you come up with that?
I wish I had, but I did work as a marketing director for Wendy's when that campaign was going on.
So the marketing director of all of Wendy's?
I was a marketing director for 8 restaurants that were in South Jersey, and there was a 9th being built when I left that role.
How old are you?
I was 19.
Wow. You're the
Yeah, it was.
marketing director, 19.
Yeah, I mean, I would talk to a radio rep about buying radio time, and when I'd meet them, they'd say, "Is your father here?" And I'd say, "What do you mean, my father? Oh, well, who's the guy buying the time?" I'm like, "It's me." What are you talking about? They thought like I was like an intern for the real guy who
That's
was
funny.
placing the ad box.
That's great. So how long did you do that?
It was a seasonal job because the restaurants were mainly in seasonal areas of South Jersey, and I did that for 2 summers. Interestingly, my mentor there, we had, when people would complain, it would come eventually to me, the marketing director. And we had these like form letters that we would write back to people who had complained about service or something going on in the restaurant. And we had these gift cards that we would send them. And they had different types of meals on them. So one was for an entire meal, one might be for a drink, one might be for French fries. And after my junior year of college, going into my senior year, I wasn't sure I was coming back to Wendy's, but I thought if they needed me to send any of these gift cards out while I was at college, maybe I should have some. So I went into the closet where we kept them locked up, Tom, and I'm admitting this now to the world. And so I took some of the cards with me to college just so that I could have them in case they needed me to do something. Well, amazingly, they never called and said, "Hey, Dave, would you write an apology letter to this customer in Marmora, New Jersey?" I was at Dickinson College in Carlisle, PA, and send them one of those cards that we know that you took with you for this occasion. Well, there happened to be a Wendy's in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And always the diligent marketing executive, even at that tender young age, I would take these gift cards and go out and have dinner with my friends on the company. And I did realize these had a little code on them that said where, like what franchisee they came from. And they said to me, when a store would get one of these cards, they'd stamp it with their store address. And my supervisor said to me, "Why are we getting all these cards back from Carlisle, PA? What, we don't have people in Carlisle, PA." And I said, "Boss, I will get right on that."
I'll find out.
You got the right, I'm on that. I'm going to be like Beretta.
And
Check that out.
your law enforcement career.
I was just trying to help, Tom.
That's good.
I was, it's funny. Now I don't know, like, did people like me back then because I was giving them free meals at Wendy's, or was it my charming
It's
personality?
probably a little bit of both.
I think it was a little bit of both.
So did you meet Dave
Thomas? No, I did not ever have that pleasure.
Now I read, I think it was a couple years ago, that he regrets naming it Wendy's after his daughter or something. Wasn't his daughter Wendy?
Yes, and I imagine that I could see that if it drew too much attention to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if that wasn't something that she necessarily wanted.
Do you go to Wendy's now today?
I have not been to a Wendy's. Probably, I think I went once in the last year.
Yeah.
And
Was
they make
it
a nice
good?
product. Yeah, it was a good product.
Yeah, it was a good product.
Yeah.
It's probably the best. It's kind of the high end of the fast food chains.
Well, if you remember at that time, the square hamburger on the round bun, it was fresh meat. It wasn't frozen. And their slogan, "Hot and Juicy,"
Triple.
back in the day was.
Yeah, man.
Oh, there used to be something called the Wendy's Pyramid, which somebody would order a it was a single, a double, a triple, a double, and a single. And eating that whole thing was called the Wendy's
I
pyramid.
didn't know about that.
I never attempted that feat of gluttony, but
But I remember my buddy Trey Maxwell and I would go to Wendy's after high school, and that was the best thing ever. I would just and had triple. Oh,
well, the manual that we used, the marketing manual, had all of these rules. Of course, this is true in any franchise situation, but how you were supposed to describe something. And the Frosty wasn't a milkshake; it was a frozen dairy dessert. That's how you're supposed to describe it.
right. It was real ice cream.
Yeah, it was high quality product.
Because McDonald's had gone to that cheap fake milkshake. And Wendy's did the real soft serve ice cream. That's all it is,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Soft serve.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. Okay. But that's probably enough of Wendy's.
Everybody listening to
send
this
us
is getting hungry right now.
Send us some money for
Absolutely, they should.
right. That's to make up for all those gift cards you used.
I still regret that, but I appreciate confessing to you, Father Tom.
Right. I know. We got it out. So, all right. All right. Well, back to what you do. So you help companies, CEOs, big companies, like with their employees, get their
Usually usually it's at the leadership level that I'm working. And it's not necessarily a big company. I think that, but it's more the area where I'm trying to have an impact is at the highest level that I can.
So one of the you're so funny because you're a very humble guy, but one of the presentations that you have done that I've been through a couple of times is the grow. Your grow presentation.
Yeah, the grow model.
The grow model, which I think is really good. And I'm wondering if you might be able to give us a little taste of that here, just a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
So
telling people what the grow model is.
The grow model was created by this consultant from the UK named John Whitmore, and it actually came from sports. I think it originally came from tennis coaching. And the idea was that when people come to you to ask for advice, you can give them advice. If the advice works, then you get the credit and they don't because it was your idea. And if your advice doesn't work, they blame you because you were wrong. And he really wanted to encourage something that's common in psychology, which is alternative solutions thinking. And this has direct implications for marketing, by the way, and generating marketing ideas. So the idea of this model was to have a method of having a conversation with someone who came to you with a problem, particularly if their performance wasn't as high as you wanted it to be. In his book, Coaching for Performance, outlines this whole method. He gave up the copyright to it, and so anyone can use the grow model. It's not something you buy. You can look it up online and learn how to use it. But basically, the acronym stands for, the G is for goal. What is the goal of this conversation? You know, from business, a lot of people may call you, Tom, and they just start telling you a problem. You don't even know why they picked up the phone to call you. When we start with the goal, what is the goal of the conversation and what's the problem they're trying to solve? So somebody calls me, they say, you know, this most ridiculous thing, people keep walking into my office, interrupting me. And I say, tell me a little bit more about that. I don't stop them and say, I need to know the goal before you can go forward in this conversation. But I want to find out, what are you looking for me out of this? Maybe they just want to vent. That's okay. We don't go through the rest of the model. But if they have a problem to solve, I want to know, well, what's, okay, so you want to talk about people coming in and interrupting you all the time. Yes. Well, how often is that happening? Now we're getting into the R of the model, which is the reality, what's happening. People come into my office, it's like 2 hours a day. Oh, wow, that's 10 hours a week. Just interruptions, like people coming in to your office to meet with you without any notice at all. Yeah. Well, what do you think it should be? Because now that's another part of the goal, is not just what do you want to talk about, but how do you want things to be different about the thing you're talking about? So we have the goal for the conversation and also the goal they're trying to solve. I expected, this is an example that I'm giving you, I expected the person to say 0. I should have 0 interrupted time. But that's not what they said. They said, well, it's 10 hours right now, but I think 3 is what it should be. I said 3 hours of interruptions a week. That's over 150 hours of interruptions a year. That's a lot of time. And she said, well, I learn stuff when people just pop into my office. So I don't want to cut that off altogether because I get information that way. So I'm like, okay, so it's 10 hours now. You want it to be 3. So now we're getting at the reality. Why do you think that is? What's going on? Well, my door's open and my office is sort of near the corner. So people are constantly walking past that office. Door's open, they just pop right in. Even if they see you on the phone, even if they see me on the phone, if I'm on the phone, they sit in the chair and they wait for me to finish. So the G is the goal for the conversation and also what they're trying to solve. The R is the reality. What's the data about this? The O is the options. And you're going to shift gears because, as you know from your experience in business, a lot of times when you sit in a meeting, people are talking about the past. And in one study, they spend up to 75% of every business meeting talking about the past. Why do we spend that much time though? What are we doing? Are we sitting around telling stories like we're at a campfire? In business, we have to move from what happened in the past to what do we want to happen in the future and what are we going to do next to make that happen. So we don't want to spend more than half of a grow conversation listening to the data. We want to get to what are the options. I said to that person, what have you done already? Well, sometimes I put up a little sign on my door, sometimes I shut the door, but that doesn't necessarily help. All right, so I say, what else do you think you could do? And that you're trying to get them to come up with their own options. Why is that so valuable? I learn what they think. I learn how effective they are at solving problems. And also in an organization, if you keep going to the CEO to solve your problem and you make less than the CEO, he now works for you or she now works for you because you've got them doing your work and we don't want them to do
That
your
drives
work.
me nuts.
Just financially, it doesn't make sense for the highest paid person in the organization to be doing all the work for everybody else. So the O, the options, and asking the right questions to get them to think of options is important. You don't want to be the answer manager. That's highly inefficient in an organization. You want to have your managers asking people, what else do you think you can do? I've asked people, if there were no rules, what would you do? And the person said, I would shut that door, lock it, and I'd go out the window every day so they wouldn't even know that I was there. Well, now we're getting to some solutions, even in the crazier things people say. When they're coming up with as many options as they can think of, by the way, you don't start asking what's the pros and the cons of each option. Why? Because that slows the thought process down. So I liken this to marketing because that's my own background. When we're coming up with marketing ideas, we want to come up with as many ideas as we can and then weigh the pros and cons of them because creative thinking gets stopped when you start asking, well, I don't think we can do that. We can't do that promotion. There's not enough parking in the parking lot or something. You don't want to slow that creative process down. You want to let it go. And so after they've come up with the options, and this person came up with a bunch of options, including if somebody walks in, I'm going to triage it. I'm going to say, is this urgent or could it wait until 4 o'clock? That's when I'm free. So stopping them right away, don't let them start talking about what they want to talk about in the example that I gave, but find out if we can do this at another time. Another option is actually having hours on her door where that door is shut and it will say, I'm not available during this time, or I have office hours at these other times, and getting people to make appointments instead of just coming in because they came into her office so often that they didn't think, well, this is cool. She must like that. She keeps talking to me, so this is okay, but it really wasn't okay. When they've come up with some options that they can use, your job as the manager is to then ask them, what do you want to do next and when do you want to do it? You're trying to find their willingness to enact this, and the W is what's next in that model and willingness. You might say to them as the owner of the company, is there any support that you need from me? They could say, yes, I need you to make a connection for me at this law firm, or yes, I need you to make an introduction for me. Or, if you know anyone who could help with this, I'd like to talk to them. But basically, we want people to leave with stuff they should be doing, not stuff that Tom should be doing, because your schedule shouldn't be filled with stuff that other people should be doing, but they asked you to do it for them. And this is kind of this weird reversal that happens in business where we're so good at problem solving, that's why we own the company. But you don't want to be continually solving everyone's problems, because they will get used to gleefully giving them to you to solve.
Right.
And so the model, you have to resist this temptation to tell everybody what to do, because that's going to be there. You're a great problem solver, or you wouldn't have that company that you do right now. But we want to reserve that for other things like strategy and building the future out, and not having to solve every problem that comes our way. The best problem solvers that I know easily get sucked into a problem. They're driving down the street and they see a guy taking his tire off, to fix a flat. And they're like, hey, he's not doing that the right way. He should be doing it this, he shouldn't. I'm like, oh my God, do you ever turn that off? But I think that's part of the trap of being a great problem solver, is we're attracted to them. So it takes a little more time to use this model when somebody comes to see you with a problem or an issue. And you don't use it for every conversation. If you're running a lab and someone says the lab's on fire, you don't say, well, what do you think our options are? You say, grab the fire extinguishers and call the fire department. You go into command mode. But for other things where you feel like they should know the answer, you've done the training, they're capable of it, you do want to, that's a method of turning that conversation back to them. When I was in the publishing company, I used this method with my own marketing staff. And I even did it with my own publisher, because when I was sending him options for different marketing issues that we were working on, I would never send him one idea. I would send him a few ideas. I'd show him the one I thought was the best. And then I'd say, but I thought of this other stuff too. So if you don't agree with this one that I think is the best choice, just let me know. And I called these the multiple choice memo. And he appreciated that I was showing him. It's like in math when you're a little kid in school and they say, show your work, right? And so you show your work. I was trying to show him, here are the other things I thought of. Because a lot of times employees won't come to you with something they think you're going to reject. So we're squelching ideas by not encouraging them to think of alternatives. Ultimately, the GROW model creates a faster organization and a more efficient organization, because people are now coming, when you have enough GROW conversations with employees, they get it, and they'll start to come to you with options instead of you going through that whole process. So they'll say, Tom, here's the issue. This firm we're trying to, connect with, blah, 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 this is happening. This is what I'd like to do. What do you think? And you go, boom, I like it. Now we're in alignment. Now we're working together efficiently and effectively. And you can say to them, what else did you think of doing? They're going to tell you, because you've trained them to think in terms of alternative solutions. And that's the key. If people remember the movie Apollo 13, there's a problem with like some kind of blower or vent system in the actual spacecraft. And the engineers on Earth have to solve the problem. What do? They take all the stuff that's in the Apollo 13 capsule, if you remember this scene, and they try to figure out, how do we create this, how do we recreate this? That's alternative solutions thinking. Let's just put everything out that we have and try to use that to create a solution.
I'm so glad that you said that. And it's fascinating, your multiple choice memo, because I was going to, when you were done, I was going to say that, well, exactly what you said is that I've trained my team to, and you and I talked about this when you did this presentation, that when you come to me with a problem that you have, or you need help with something, first of all, don't come to me with the problem and say, here's my problem, and sit there and wait for me to solve it. Because if you're asking me to do that, I don't need you.
Exactly.
And so you're just asking for me to find somebody else. And so that's not a good thing. So my advice to everyone listening is, you got to solve your own problems. And what we're saying here is that you might not have the perfect solution, but that's why your multiple choice memo is great, because these are at least 3 solutions. And here's my recommendation of the best one.
This is
And
also super diagnostic, because
yeah,
if somebody keeps coming back to you with ideas that you know won't work, and show they weren't trained well, and show they literally don't have the skill, then solve that problem by getting them skilled up. Or you might find that they're not the right fit for that role. But sometimes we're afraid to ask because we don't want to hear the answer that they have. You can't be afraid of it. You have to encourage them to show you how they think. And because it could be that you find they really do need more training. We haven't trained them up. They don't have that skill yet.
and the other thing too is that, and I can't remember where I read this or who said this, and I apologize, but you can't be the smartest person in the room. You have to hire smarter people than you. Like
I would
that's
go even further, because I've seen this, and I'm sure you have too. As soon as someone thinks they're the smartest person in the room, something bad's about to happen.
yeah.
I've just seen
Well,
that over and over again.
I am relieved constantly. And I just had a meeting a couple hours ago where this exact thing happened, where there was, I wouldn't call it an issue, but there's a particular challenge, and the team put this meeting together and basically just needed they had already had all the stuff and they needed me to make a decision about it. But they had all the information and they just needed to know what I wanted to do. They didn't need me to solve the problem. They already kind of had everything there.
That's
And
good.
I wasn't there really. I was just there to give them, well, this is what I think. And they were already ready to go whatever direction. And that's what you want. And, I am thrilled to not be the one that is, you do not want that. You need to hire, and especially in my business. And this is the thing. You do not want me. I'm in the web. I build websites, and I don't anymore. You do not want me coding your website and making designs. I have almost 70 people working for me, and you want that. You don't. I have top people doing that. And the other thing too is, I tell lawyers, I work mostly for lawyers. That's our core competency, lawyers and doctors. I'm constantly asking them, why in the world do you want to be doing SEO yourself? Why? Don't you want to be a really good lawyer?
Right.
I definitely know that your clients would prefer you to be being a lawyer than being an SEO person.
And you would want your lawyer to be as specialized and knowledgeable in what they do, as you want the person who's running the website to be about that very same area. And you have a very interesting constituency also, because lawyers have a very particular worldview, and because they're often involved in ancillary things. If they're in medical malpractice or complicated malpractice issues, they almost become an expert in that. And they can sometimes think, God bless, I come from a family of lawyers, so this is okay. But they sometimes think they're experts on other things that they're not. And other professions, I think physicians almost shy away from that. They don't want to be the expert on that, and don't profess to be.
Yeah.
So I'll never get work from another law firm, but you're doing it, and that's what's important.
Well,
and I
lawyers,
would say,
hey, they're all going to hear it. They all know it already. They all are
right.
smarter than everybody else.
I think the ones who are being honest are going to say, that guy totally understands me.
Yeah.
But a side point to this is, you can use the GROW model in a meeting. So if a bunch of people come in and they just start yakking, you want to say, hey, why are we here? What's the goal? Where do we want to be at the end of this meeting? And work the process through with the whole group.
Yeah. Well, I love that presentation, that GROW model, and thank you very much for sharing
my pleasure.
that. And I remember when Molly first heard that, my marketing director, Molly, she first heard that, I think it was the last Business Black Ops, and she was just loved it, and
I'm glad.
been implementing it. And so So Dr. Dave, how does somebody who hears this podcast reach out and get to work with you?
The website is weimanconsulting.com. It's WEIMAN consulting.com, like one word. And we still use an old-fashioned telephone, and that's 610-642-3040. I heard it ring a few times. I had turned it off in my office. I hope that didn't interfere with the quality of our presentation today.
I didn't hear it at all.
All right, that's
and I
good.
appreciate you not interrupting this
Yes.
amazing interview by taking that phone call, but I'm sure you'll return it immediately.
Indeed.
Well, Dr. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Tom, it was great seeing you and talking with you.
Yes, and I will see you soon. Hopefully, this pandemic will move on.
Yep.
In the next few months, and we will be able to. I definitely think we'll see each other here in the fall.
Yep.
Out in the desert as usual.
Indeed.
For our business Black Ops ritual, and if not sooner. And I thank you, my friend, and you stay safe and healthy and happy.
Thank you, Tom. You too.
Okay, buddy. And this has been Tom Foster with my good buddy, Dr. Dave, and the world of marketing. You all stay safe and happy. Thank you, everyone.